As I begin my talk, allow me to amuse you with a story that I had written for it. Once upon a time, in a land nestled between the hills and oceans, existed a little town. Life here ebbed and flowed with the rhythm of the waves. Of its residents was a girl named Lila. Now, Lila was no ordinary girl. She was in fact a master navigator who needed not a chart or a compass. It was as though she spoke a secret language with the oceans as the winds would brush past her. In a town full of sailors themselves, people often gazed in reverence at her ability to take them to lands they had never ventured before. This world of ours, it didn't just consist of its individual spirits. Its community, they had found a shared identity in the waters that bordered their homes. The rhythms of the waves inspiring a rich culture of livelihood and sustenance. We have one other member to introduce, a fellow named John. Now, John, he was a friend of Lila's as well, although contrasted her. He had interests in the skies, in a land where the people's lives were anchored to the land and water. His eyes fixed upwards to the clouds, and with hands as skilled as any sailor's, he would craft vessels, not for the seas, but for the ones that float in the clouds. Alas, one fine day, something terrible befalls this town. Lila was getting to work as usual in the morning when she was met with an unusual crowd at the bay. She overheard certain chatter. "Oh, what do you think must have happened here?" "I am not too certain, but I do remember someone saying that they were very thirsty last night. Do you think it could possibly have something to do with that?" When Lila reached the bay, she was shocked with horror. No one had been thirsty the night before, except maybe the twisted sense of humor of fate, because she found herself standing in front of an empty seabed. Yes, the sea had vanished. Lila was devastated, and so were the townsfolk. To them, the seas, it was a source of life, of sustenance. Soon, she found herself standing at the bay, feeling completely adrift, hoping that the waters would return, long after everyone had dispersed. Think to a time when you had to face such a situation, a vanishing sea moment, let's say. Do you recall how you had navigated yourself in these times? Back in our story, it was a tumultuous period in this village. Although our character, John, he finally found his calling amidst this calamity. His balloons that were once looked at as strange vessels became the town's salvation. It was the only connection they had to the outside world. And it wasn't smooth sailing. Most people had never ventured to the skies before, and they were very skeptical of the idea. Some so scared they had to duct tape themselves to the vessels. Soon one day, John, he took his time to visit his dear friend Lila, although he was heartbroken. Lila had become a shadow of the spirit that she once was. It was as if a part of her had evaporated with the waters. Hoping to cheer her up, he offered, "Lila, join me in the clouds one of these days. I'm certain it's going to lift your moods up." To which Lila did agree, a little reluctantly albeit. Although, as they ascended, something lovely happened. A familiar thrill coursed through her veins as the winds brushed past her once again, reminiscing the calm that she would feel at the seas. She thought to herself, "Hold on, this feels all too familiar." And it was in that moment that she realized her mastery was not of the seas alone, it was of navigation itself. She hadn't really forgotten her skills. All she needed to do was repurpose it to a different setting. This excitement of this revelation had begun a transformation within her. With the help and guidance of her friend John, it took her no time before she could master the skies as she once did the seas. And the town, they now saw their master navigator soaring above the sky in confidence. They had witnessed in Lila's ascent and her journey a metaphor for their own. Her adaptation and embrace of the skies became their inspiration, a lesson in resilience and the ability to adapt. The end. In this story, the closer we look, we realize that it's not merely a tale about John or Lila or the disappearing sea or even the town. It was written with an intention to reflect on concepts that were maybe a little deeper, on resilience, the differences in thought, and the need to find a new path. At its core, it speaks to a broader and more silent protagonist that lingered throughout the story, our need and ability to adapt. Adaptation. It's a word we often associate with survival in its raw form, but in today's world, it's less about just getting through and more about moving forward with intention. It lays at the heart of just transition, a means to a fair and sustainable shift to the future. Technological advancement has been taking place at a breathtaking pace. It took around 500 years for us to go from our very first rudimentary boats all the way to probably one of the most pivotal inventions in human history, the wheel. Now, that timeline is going to pale in comparison when you realize that it was in 1903 that humans had taken their first flight, and in just another 66 years, we made it all the way to the moon. Yes, the world is changing fast indeed, and in many ways we seem not to be able to keep up with it. The intergovernmental panels on multiple reports on climate change had highlighted an important strategy to mitigate its effects, stressing on an important point: we need to adapt alongside our other efforts. It's about us and communities coming together to respond to the changing circumstances that we face. And in many cases, we have shown that we indeed can take these steps. Take, for example, the communities in Bangladesh adapting to their waterlogged reality. They took adversity as a challenge and created floating schools that rise up above with the floodwaters. Another example, the sub-Saharan deserts, where people built underground dams to hold water in times of scarcity. Reversing the effects of climate change is a marathon. It is not a sprint. Immediate reversal is a Herculean task, but what lies in our capacity today is the ability to adapt. Not just individually, but also collectively. As an engineer, it sits at the heart of what I do. Our solutions being living designs, constantly tuned and tweaked to the shifting problems that we face. Just as a river carves its path through a landscape, so do our innovations. Be it designing a bridge or modeling the universe on a quantum computer. To conclude, what if Lila had been too afraid to embrace the sky? The opportunities that she would have missed mirrors that of what we would if we don't take the right steps forward. The time is to act now, and let's ensure that our journey through change mirrors that of Lila's, one that is forward-looking, adaptive, and successful. Thank you.